We are fighting for strong support for our seniors who built this country. We are fighting for dental care and Pharmacare.
Wrong. Since early last year, Mark Carney and his Liberals have accused Conservatives of wanting to cut Pharmacare, insisting that they were in fact the party that were fighting to protect and expand it. But buried deep inside the government's own spring economic update, there's something missing. And people are starting to catch on what it is. Mark Carney and his team, who have been assuring seniors and Canadians that they are fighting for their health care, have quietly removed it entirely from their fiscal plan without even saying a word. Let's take a look.
We need a strong economy, but when we're fighting for a strong economy, we're fighting for good Canadian health care for everyone. We are fighting for strong support for our seniors who built this country. We are fighting for child care for young families that they put in place. We are fighting for dental care and Pharmacare for everyone who needs it.
Ask what do you think about Poilievre reversing on Pharmacare? He says he's willing to keep Pharmacare, keep dental care.
Sorry, what's the...
Poilievre says he's willing to keep Pharmacare, keep the dental care if he gets it.
So I'm learning this in real time, and it's unbelievable to me that someone who has railed against these programs as wasteful, now that he realizes his position is unpopular, he shifts his principles altogether. You don't like my principles, look at my other principles, is his essential approach here. This is the guy who has been talking about tearing down the protections that we're going to deliver free contraception to Canadian women and free medicine and devices to people living with diabetes.
So that was before the election began on March 9th, and it was after the election campaign began on March 25th. So you have Mark Carney winning his Liberal leadership and saying, we're going to be fighting for all these programs. We have your back. We have your back, seniors. That was the demographic that basically put him in office. There's a bunch of seniors that voted Conservative, but the vast majority ended up voting for Mr. Carney because they trusted him. And then Sean Fraser, says, well, it's so important that we deal or we hand out free contraception to young women because we care about young women so much, and free diabetes medication. It's so important that we do that. Okay? And it's even in the Liberal campaign, and this is still online. So this was posted on April 21st, 2025, 7 days before the election. Mark Carney's Liberals to protect and modernize Canada's public healthcare system. One of Canada's most important sources of national pride and identity is our public healthcare. For decades, we have proudly accessed healthcare with our health cards, not our credit cards. Canadians expect and deserve a strong public healthcare system that improves and modernizes over time, responds to changing needs, and is available wherever and whenever they need care. Today's system is facing significant challenges in living up to these expectations. Canada Strong, Mark Carney's plan to unite, secure, protect, and build Canada includes comprehensive measures to build and protect our healthcare system in partnership with provinces, territories, and Indigenous peoples, expanding on his previous commitment to protect dental care and Pharmacare.
We will protect and expand programs that save Canadian families thousands of dollars per year, including Pharmacare and childcare.
There was much hype about this budget. Much has already been made public in the pre-budget announcements. My question is what is not in the budget. The impact of the 15% cut across most departments, including the loss of 40,000 workers, is buried in buzzwords like streamlining, modernizing, and recalibrating. Will the Prime Minister tell Canadians what programs are being cut, which ones will end when the funding sunsets, and how people in our communities will be impacted. Canadians deserve to know.
Hear, hear.
Honorable Ministre des Finances.
Mr. Speaker, I'd like to thank my colleague for the very important question that she asked. I think she will have seen in the budget that we remain true to our values, Mr. Speaker, Canadian values. We made sure that while we do a budget which is focused on the future and investment, that we protect people, that we protect childcare, that we protect Pharmacare.
The Liberal Prime Minister himself promised the $62 billion deficit. Their own budget shattered that promise, adding $16 billion in new debt, and they've added billions more in recent weeks. Young Canadians are taking on record personal debt to pay the bill. According to RBC, 64% of millennials are anxious about their financial future as monthly costs squeeze budgets. Which Liberal minister will stand now to explain to those young Canadians why they should take on more personal liability and stress to cover ever-increasing Liberal debt?
The Honourable Parliamentary Secretary.
You know, it's interesting. The Conservatives never tell us what they would cut. If they want to pursue this line of questioning, it's logical that they would go to another issue. Would they cut the Canada Child Benefit? They would. Would they cut child care? They certainly would. Would they cut Pharmacare? They certainly would do that. I want to commend the member for her propensity. She's newly elected, relatively. I want to commend her for her propensity to do what Conservatives do, which is to constantly cite problems but never solutions. What would the Conservatives do? We see what we're doing. We're embracing the resource economy. We're ensuring a foundation for the future so that young people can get ahead. They would cut every program that exists with respect to youth. They would get rid of the Canada Child Benefit, or very close to that. They don't want to support childcare, dental care, the beginnings of Pharmacare, any of these programs.
Affordability is improving, but this government is just getting started, and we won't stop.
The Honourable Leader of the Opposition.
Canadians are hoping they do stop because they can't afford to pay one more penny. This Prime Minister is completely out of touch and Canadians are completely out of money. He thinks it's more affordable because his company puts its money in tax havens, so it's very affordable when you don't have to pay any tax. Meanwhile, the single mothers who are having to put their grocery items back, they understand that he's wrong to say affordability is better than ever before. The seniors who can't afford the doubling of rent under this Liberal government, they know he's wrong. Canadians know he's wrong. Will he stand up, admit that he goofed up, and that he was wrong on affordability?
The Right Honourable Prime Minister.
Mr. Speaker, I want to read into the record for the benefit of the Leader of the Opposition, I work for Canadians and only Canadians. I work for Canadians and only Canadians to improve their affordability. That's why we have the groceries and essential benefits, over $500 for 12 million Canadians June 5th. That's why we're cutting the federal tax on fuel. That's why we're providing Canadians, average family, with over $20,000 in benefit from child care to dental care, Pharmacare. Everything he voted against.
Liberals are all about protecting Pharmacare. I think we've made that abundantly clear. And they keep assuming that the Conservatives are going to cut Pharmacare. All right. No problem here, right? Wrong. Canada's federal government abandons national Pharmacare. There will be no new federal funding for Pharmacare. Provinces and territories will have to go it alone. Quote, our government remains focused on empowering Canadians by lowering costs, expanding opportunity, and protecting the vital social programs Canadians rely on, from childcare to dental care to Pharmacare, end quote. Those were the words of the federal government in the November 2025 budget. Fast forward to spring 2026. From the spring economic update, it appears that there will be no new federal funding for additional Pharmacare deals, with the bilateral health funding dropping from $4.3 billion in 2025-2026 to $3.1 billion in 2027-2028. It seems that the federal government doesn't see a future for national Pharmacare. This is disappointing, considering the progress that has been made advancing Pharmacare in Canada. The Pharmacare Act was passed in 2024, and under the Trudeau Liberal government, the federal government signed 4 bilateral agreements with British Columbia, Manitoba, PEI, and the Yukon. If the federal government walks away from Pharmacare, it puts at risk ongoing funding that has only recently been committed. In 2025-2026, the federal government contributed $88.1 million to support these provinces and one territory in the expansion of public coverage of diabetes medications and contraception for all residents. The federal Pharmacare contribution is expected to increase to $269.6 million by 2028-2029. But after 2029? It appears that the federal government is killing any hope of national pharmacare before it even got off the ground. In April, PEI's health minister revealed that Ottawa will be cutting $29 million in healthcare funding to the province over the next 3 years. After PEI raised public concerns, Newfoundland and Labrador's health minister said, quote, "The door was closed on our province," end quote. The federal government appears poised to allow existing bilateral funding agreements to expire without renewal, translating into cuts for existing provincial healthcare services, including funding for diabetes medications and contraceptives, which was negotiated with these 3 provinces and 1 territory. And if those jurisdictions want to remain the existing universal coverage for diabetes medications and contraceptives, they will have to fill the funding gap created by the federal government. Isn't this interesting, folks? You have the federal government chiding, you have the federal government shaming, and you have the federal government trying to tell everybody and scare everybody that the Conservatives would be cutting the Pharmacare program. Meanwhile, that's exactly what they did. This is very familiar. Remember when the government was scaring public servants around the country, especially in the Ottawa area, that if you elect a Conservative government, that what you're really doing is you're electing a government that is going to cost you your job because they're going to be making tons of cuts to the federal public service? And that's exactly what happened. So here's the question that a lot of Canadians have to answer. How can you trust a word that Mark Carney and any of these Liberals actually say? If you voted for Mark Carney, how do you trust him? He's going back on virtually every single thing that he said. He said he'd get a deal with Donald Trump. Hasn't happened, and he's actually done the reverse. He seems not interested at all in going down to Washington to have a chat with Donald Trump, despite the fact that it's costing tens of thousands of Canadians jobs, it's costing hundreds of billions of dollars in investment, and it's costing people, in some cases, their actual lives. He said that he was going to build the strongest economy in the G7. Meanwhile, things have only gotten worse by every metric that we have. He said that he was going to cut spending. Meanwhile, we have a finance minister that resigned from the Trudeau government because she was too embarrassed to table a $62 billion deficit. And Mark Carney steps out and his whole caucus is clapping that they had upwards of a $90 billion projected deficit in November. And they're still crowing about it that they have a $65 billion deficit now, with $25 billion somewhere earmarked for this sovereign wealth fund, which brings it back up to $90 billion. I don't care how you want to slice it. It's going to be costing taxpayer money. He said that he was going to be protecting Pharmacare and used it as one of the pillars in his platform. Now, that looks like it is gone. So, swing voters, I don't blame you for wanting to see that this guy with this massive resume is going to come in and be Superman and fix the Canadian economy. But he's barely lived in Canada in his adult life. If you've barely lived in Canada and call yourself a European and spend most of your time while you're Prime Minister not even in Canada, how do you expect him to even understand how Canada even works? And a lot of you seniors, you voted for him because you thought that he dressed nice, and you thought he was a banker, and you thought that he was a businessman, and CBC and CTV and all the mainstream media was telling you how great he was. Well, the one thing that he is great at is lying to your face, because he's going back on just about every single promise that he made. And now he's coming for programs that are actually affecting you. If you're a senior and you are relying on the diabetes medication and you're relying on that to just be handed to you over the counter, that's not going to be available for too much longer. So can you really believe anything that Mark Carney even says anymore?